is a free resource connecting you with HUD-approved housing counseling agencies available 24 hours a day who can give you the information and clarity you need. Call the HOPE hotline at 888-995-HOPE. That's 888-995-4673. Brought to you by NeighborWorks America and the Ad Council.
Flip a switch, the light turns on. Turn a tap, you get clean water. Hike up the thermostat, you've got heat.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced a plan to offer IDs to all residents, regardless of their immigration status. On Fox's The Real Story, host Gretchen Carlson falsely suggested that the plan is intended to permit undocumented immigrants to vote. She asked guest Emily Tish Sussman.
So, Emily, am I to assume that the reason that de Blasio would want this is so that people can move on to vote? I mean, I don't really understand what do you think his whole effort is in this?
Well, we do really see that having these either ID cards or driver's license for the undocumented does actually promote public safety. You know, those who are involved in fatal car crashes, 1 in 5 have not gone through the proper training of a driver's license. It would bring them into that kind of system. It would have more economic security for those. It would have better trust with the police. Like, it really does bring them in a number of ways.
Carlson's concern about undocumented immigrants voting is baseless, since to register to vote in New York City, you must already be a U.S. citizen. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Newsflash for straight guys. Newsflash for straight guys. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The next sentence in New York Times columnist Frank Bruni's recent piece titled Panic in the Locker Room is, "You've been naked in front of a gay man." Actually, probably in front of many gay men, either long ago in gym class or more recently at the health club or somewhere else. The reason for all this locker room talk is, of course, college football star Michael Sam, who is about to be drafted by the National Football League. That is, the homophobic Macho is as Macho does National Football League, where a New Orleans Saints linebacker said, "Imagine if he's the guy next to me and, I get dressed naked, taking a shower, the whole nine. It's just so he looks at me. How am I supposed to respond?" Bruni answers, "A squeal would be unmanly. And NFL players tend to use their firearms away from the stadium. So I would advise them to do what countless females have done with leering males throughout history. Step away, move on, dare I say, woman up." Bruni points out that anxiety in the locker room, a place more bedlam than boudoir, makes no sense. I can only add that the stereotype of gay men as characterized by leering and libido is crumbling, even in the homophobic bastion called the National Football League, to which we can all say, it can't happen soon enough. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union, because freedom can't protect itself.
Packers.
Vikings. We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown. We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full. But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As VW workers in Chattanooga, Tennessee wrap up their vote on whether or not to join the UAW, pro-union workers remain upbeat and excited about joining the United Auto Workers. David Gleason is one of them.
I'm not concerned. I'm upbeat. Feelings in the plant are really high. Everybody's excited about it. They're excited about the change that's coming, getting ready for the Works Council and getting ready to welcome the UAW into the plant.
Mark Lemon is another VW worker in Tennessee who can't wait for the UAW to come in.
I'm ready for this to be UAW under the German Volkswagen umbrella, the Works Council also. The local support is tremendous, and there's not only local support, there's an international presence here, not only from Germany, from Sweden, elsewhere, and very impressive and warms my heart.
Eric DeLacy is amazed by what's happening with the VW-UAW organizing drive.
It's amazing just to be there at the start and at times think this was never going to happen or it was just taking forever, and then finally being at this time, it's almost breathtaking.
Desperate to come up with anything that might sway the vote against the UAW, U.S. Senator Bob Corker is claiming he's been assured that VW will reward the plant with a new SUV to build if the workers reject the UAW. VW says the union vote won't influence where the SUV is built, and the UAW's Gary Castile says Corker's claim is a direct contradiction of what VW has said. Labor law professor Harley Shakin says Corker's comments amounts to economic intimidation that undermines union representation in elections. Indiana labor law professor Ken Dow-Schmidt says Corker's comments could be grounds for running the VW-UAW election all over again because it could be seen as interfering to the point that it violates federal labor law. The International Longshoremen's Association, Local 333 in Baltimore this week, overwhelmingly rejected what was characterized as the best and final offer on a new local bulk cargo labor agreement from port employers. The National ILA says approving the contract would have meant giving back millions of dollars to the employers. For now, there's no strike or threat of strike. The union says it intends to keep working and keep negotiating. In October, union dock workers struck for 3 days, stopping work at the port. A federal arbitrator ruled the union owes $3.8 million in damages to Baltimore port employers stemming from that strike. Mississippi's Republican-controlled state Senate has passed some anti-union legislation that would let companies sue if they are coerced into staying neutral in a union organizing drive. Choosing union representation by signing cards is also banned by the legislation. Another piece of legislation passed by the state Senate in Mississippi bans mass picketing by unions that blocks entrances or damages property. Yet another anti-union bill bans cities and counties from requiring union labor on construction projects. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
You are now listening to The Zero Hour with Richard Eskow, produced by the We Act Radio Network in Washington, D.C., and broadcasts across the nation. Visit us online at thisisthezerohour.com or at youtube.com/thezerohour. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Eskow.
Wow. I was not prepared for that intro at all. I feel like Johnny Carson. That was awesome. I'm Richard Eskow. I'm RJ Eskow, and you are listening to The Zero Hour on 1480 AM, We Act Radio, Washington, D.C., and through the magic of the internet. You're listening to it anywhere you want to be, anytime you want to be. So that's the power of the new media, which we'll be exploring in the days, weeks, and even in the next 3 hours to come. So please stick with us. We have some conversations about using the media in political activism with Ben Wickler, who will be a great guest. Well, we're going to really enjoy that. We're going to be talking about some interesting and, dare I say, amusing in a Schadenfreude sort of way developments in the war against Social Security being waged by billionaires. We're going to be talking about big food, the big food industry, and whether it's replacing big tobacco and needs to be stopped in the same way. And we're going to be talking a little bit about a cultural war on women in this country and the latest development on it, which is, this is such a weird society because this is, if you'll forgive me for putting it such a banal way, this is a weird society. Here's why. Because we claim, as a result, I suppose, of the strong fundamentalist Christian influence in our history, we claim to revere women, put them on a pedestal. That's why the male-dominated cultural system fights it when women fight for the right to vote, for equal pay, equal work, equal opportunity, control over their own bodies. We're always told that, no, we revere women. We don't want to sully them with the day-to-day world that we men have to wallow in all day. That's the excuse that's always given, but yet there's an ongoing war, and that's not, you hear that a lot, the war on women. It's not just rhetoric, it's a reality. We're going to be talking about the latest developments in that, and one of the things that's so disturbing about that is that the media has become so complicit with its desire for quote-unquote objectivity even when there's clear right and wrong in a political debate, clear right and wrong in a business issue or an economic issue. False objectivity suggests that you have to say, well, on the one hand this, but on the other hand that, even when somebody is doing an injustice to another human being. That wasn't journalism traditionally, but it's the new model of journalism, partially because so much journalism is funded by corporations, and partially because that's a way to stay out of trouble with your bosses, with your sponsors, with big corporate interests. With you don't want people to yell at you, so you say on the one hand, on the other hand, and when somebody says you're not telling the truth, you say, well, I'm just being objective. Well, the latest development in that kind of objectivity, as we'll be discussing shortly, is that now even rapists, well, there's a this side and a that side to this story. That's how low this supposedly woman-revering culture is capable of going in the mass media, and yet people keep their jobs with that kind of false objectivity. But it leads me to a slightly different discussion, which is, I guess if I were to call it this, I would call it, wait a minute, I got a little technical thing I got to do here. And I am not functionally capable of doing two things at once. That's not the way I roll, two things at once. Okay, now, what I was saying, okay, speaking of women, we claim in this country to revere women, but we also love popular culture, movies, TV shows that depict the most graphic and horrible violence and torturing of women, which frankly I'm disgusted by. But as we'll see, as I'm just about to mention, a recent news story kind of brought that back to me, even though it wasn't directly about women's issues. There was a story last week that in the House of Representatives, a bunch of members of Congress were cynically working on the Republican side to decide whether or not to accept, I think it was the debt ceiling bill, and they started getting hate email, vile, sort of, we'll get you if you do this, or how dare you betray America by doing something reasonable, that kind of Tea Party mania. Hate mail started being addressed towards Republican members of Congress. Now, here's the interesting thing, and then we'll get back to the culture of hostility towards women. The interesting thing is the emails were coming from an address that could only be known, and we're going to addresses that could only be known by another member of Congress. So, in other words, all the corporate sellout Republicans were horrified that somewhere in their own midst was somebody who really believed this stuff. One of the telling things about that story is that there are so many leading politicians who don't believe the rhetoric they spew or any of those things. They're just serving corporate interests. And it became so obvious because all these Republican leaders were horrified that somebody in their midst actually believes this stuff. But I kept thinking, there was one line in it that said, these emails are coming from inside the House. And I thought, why? They're coming from inside the House. And that was horrifying people. Of course, that's a familiar trope in our anti-woman culture of horror movies and suspense movies. The phone calls are coming from inside the House. You remember there? I think there was a play we did in high school. You probably did too, called Sorry, Wrong Number, where a woman all alone is incapable physically of defending herself. She's ill or something, and she's getting harassing phone calls, and then we find they're coming from inside the house. I think there was another movie, Wait Until Dark, where the woman was blind and couldn't find her way around, and there was an intruder in the house. So here we have suddenly the irony of our anti-woman culture being flipped back on a party and a party's leaders who have done so much that is anti-woman in the last several years, whether it's on transvaginal probes or taking away the right to choose, or not supporting women's rights in the workplace, or not extending the minimum wage, which is going to cause a lot of women to suffer. I'm sorry, not extending unemployment insurance, which is going to cause a lot of women to suffer. Not raising the minimum wage when more than half of minimum wage workers are women, many of them single mothers, most of them not teenagers, according to the mythology. So here you have the anti-woman party, and also I'm critical of Democrats too. I'm critical of both parties, but I think it's fair to characterize the Republicans as the anti-woman party. And what do they find themselves trapped with? The oldest anti-woman trope in American popular culture. These messages are coming from inside the House. So that's what we'll be up against in the weeks and months to come. We'll be right back with the rest of the show. I know you'll find it interesting, if not always entertaining, perhaps sometimes disturbing, but always informative. That's what we're here to do for you. So please stick with us. We'll be back with our first guest right after this. I'm RJ Eskow. Let's do this thing. This is the Zero Hour.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
And we are back on the Zero Hour. Our first guest is, and I'm not sure I'm going to get this right, but please bear with me, Helena Botomiller-Evich, who is the agriculture reporter for Politico, and she's done a great story on big food, whether it's the new big tobacco. So she's a long-term, apparently I have bad data here. Okay, this is what we do on the Zero Hour. We roll with the punches. We go with the flow. You tell us what's happening, and we do it. So our next guest is someone I know well, and the We Act Radio family knows well, Alex Lawson, who is the Executive Director of Social Security Works, and is also, dare I say, a good friend of mine, and great leader in this whole world of Social Security, not to mention the whole We Act Radio universe. So, Alex, are you with us?
I am. Thanks, RJ, for that intro. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well,
about
I gotta
the
say,
agriculture stuff.
you know, I don't say anything I don't mean. So, and listen, I got a question for you, which is, I think it was you who first shared with me what I consider to be, in a selfish, schadenfreude sort of way, the fun story of the week, which is something about an organization called the Can Kicks Back. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Man, it really is one of the greatest stories of the week. The Can Kicks Back is a front group. It's a millennial, and I'm putting that in air quotes, arm of the Wall Street front group that is pushing cuts to Social Security and Medicare so that Wall Street can continue to suck as much money as they can out of all of working Americans. And the Can Kicks Back is just their youth arm. It is the latest iteration of their youth arm. They basically have these front groups going back at least 30 years. And I don't know if you want me to go into what came out this week, or if you want to set that up.
No. I mean, I think first, just to let people know that there's billionaire Pete Peterson and others are funding. There's other Wall Street types are funding a whole. I was the first one to call it a hydra of many-headed organization that's basically just the same people doing the same hype in different forms. One of them was the idea that we're the new generation, and we're going to say we won't let you kick the can down the road anymore. We want to cut the deficit and make sure is less Social Security available when we get old, and all that nonsense. And what was the story this week, Alex? Because that was the one that I have to say I took a little pleasure in.
And so did I. So the Can Kicks Back had a Google group that they used to communicate with each other. And that Google group was actually set to public, so that anybody could go into the Google group and see what they were emailing each other about. And they obviously didn't know it was set to public, because as soon as they were contacted by reporters for a story, they quickly changed it to private, but not before a writer at Politico was able to go through their entire archives and just pull out some really damning email exchanges that are extraordinarily funny. My favorite is actually an exchange where they're talking about demanding a correction from Dave Weigel, writing in Slate, who said that they were funded primarily by Pete Peterson, who is a billionaire plutocrat. He was Nixon's commerce secretary. And he's basically the tip of the spear of this plutocratic drive to destroy Social Security and Medicare. And they were saying they should demand a retraction from Weigel for saying that they were funded by him. And then another one of their people, and these are the leaders of the Can Kicks Back, said, well, technically most of our money does come from an organization that is funded almost entirely by Pete Peterson. So technically, I don't think we can ask for a correction. And it's just like, it is a eye-poppingly ridiculous exchange to read, because they have been so adamant in saying, we're not a front group for these plutocrats, for these Wall Street billionaires who only want to dismantle Social Security and Medicare. We really are a millennial grassroots organization of people who care about the debt and the deficit, but only if by caring about the debt and the deficit you mean destroying Social Security and Medicare. And then you see their conversations amongst themselves where they're like, well, technically all of our funding does come from Wall Street plutocrats, so I don't think we can ask.
I read that and I thought this is like those second-rate PSAs where somebody says, gee, we can't really do that because, we actually are kind of evil. And you see those and you say, no, come on, guys, you can give me a better script than this. This is too obvious. But this was actually what happened. They actually had to say, well, no, we can't really say we're real and represent genuine opinions of ordinary people because we really are just a front group for a billionaire. That was a wonderful moment. But the other wonderful moment for me is that, they love to lecture us. All of them, they have the same script, whether they're pretending to be old or young, rich or poor. They all have the same script that says the nation just has to learn to tighten its budget like a family does, sitting around a kitchen table, which, by the way, is absolute nonsense economically. But we won't go into that. But as you know, I couldn't resist when we started sending these emails around saying, when we learned that they're out of money.
Yep.
And, I guess they didn't learn how to tighten their belts sitting around the kitchen table with the rest of the billionaires. I guess they kicked the can down the road, and, we could beat that one to death all day. But what's the message?
In that discussion, they're like, they talk about, oh, well, we'll just have to go back to Stan, who they're on a first-name name basis with, who's Stan Druckenmiller, who is a billionaire hedge fund plutocrat who gave them $250,000. So, just like the typical American working family, when they run out of money, you just call up your Wall Street plutocrat friend, and he'll just write you a check for $250,000, obviously.
Right, because you sit around the kitchen table and you think, well, we better tighten our belts and call Stan. So what's the real lesson here? I got to say, the last time you and I talked on this show, I said I can't believe how well things have gone in this multi-year fight that's gone from protecting Social Security to actually doing the right thing now, a conversation about expanding Social Security. In my wildest dreams, I didn't expect a gift like this. Are we finally getting the message that God himself supports this cause?
I think, Paul Krugman put it on his blog, I think best, where he said, he's just pointing out that this is the latest in a long run of these fake AstroTurf billionaire-funded efforts to be exposed as such, and it shows that all of these things, which do dominate the discussion in D.C., they don't represent the concerns of real Americans. They represent the concerns of plutocrats on Wall Street who have been executing PR campaigns and making it look like there's a whole bunch of Americans out there, really wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare. But the funniest thing about the whole thing is they're so inept at it. They stumble, they trip over themselves time after time because of their arrogance and their ineptitude, and the fact that there really are only a dozen or so of them. So when they're faced against the 300 million Americans who are like, no, I earned my Social Security and you are not taking it away from me, I think the schadenfreude at this latest story is well deserved, and I'm having a fun time watching this story unfold.
I usually try to be the high road guy, and we can have a discourse about this. No, I got to say, on this one, the microwave got switched on, the popcorn got taken out, and I'm going to watch and see where this one goes, because I will say this with all sincerity, when it comes to Pete Peterson and Maya McGinnis and the other people who have been working to undermine America's social insurance programs, I've got to say, it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people. So, Alex Lawson, thanks so much, as always, for being with us. We are going to stay on this story, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us about it.
So do I, RJ. Looking forward to it.
You bet. That was Alex Lawson, and one last note about the Pete Peterson Hydra. I was the first one to call it that. Krugman now refers to it as the Peterson Hydra. I also have to point out that they created a game called Budget Ball. that anybody can play, but the rules are you have to balance the budget along very limited lines that kind of make you want to cut Social Security, even though by law it can't contribute to the federal deficit. So I have called Budget Ball Ayn Rand meets Death Race 2000. But you're welcome to look it up for yourself. Just part of the Peterson Hydra that we'll keep talking about in the next segment. Please stay with us. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor.
A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around. Stick it in the devil.
Colon cancer almost always starts with a polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh? I didn't even see you guys there. Oh.
Get the test, get the polyp.
I want to talk to my lawyer!
Get the cure.
I got a phone call!
CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone nice as you.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or a health clinic. If you need help, see a doctor.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
This is RJ Eskow, and we are back on the Zero Hour. So, I'm not sure if Alex is still with us, but hopefully we'll be getting him back, and another guest as well, because the other dimension of this whole Social Security issue, the dimension that's been put together by that network of organizations we will refer to henceforth as the Peterson Hydra, is this, which the idea that there is a generational war. The idea that there is a generational war taking place, the idea that somehow young are battling the old. And one of the biggest disappointments for me of the past week was to see Bill Maher, who very often sees through the BS, signing into this nonsense idea that there are greedy geezers out there, to use another person's term. The old people are getting all the money. This is nonsense. This is not the way social insurance systems like Social Security or Medicare work, and buying into the idea that there's a war between the young and the old, and as Bill Maher put it, the old won. There's a war between the plutocrats and the rest of us, and it's up to us to fight that war and not the phony wars that the plutocrats are trying to sell us. And so here to talk about it again is Alex Lawson, and also joining us now for this part of the conversation is Omid Feruzi, who is president of George Washington University's College Democrats, and has already at his young age has a number of political credits to his name. So Omid, are you with us?
I am. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Alex, you back with us?
I am.
All right, this has been an exciting roller coaster first hour for us here at the Zero Hour because of some technical problems, but we will prevail, and we are all together now to talk about the notion of generational war. So I wanted to start by asking you first, Omid, what got you interested in this topic at your age?
Well, I've always been interested in politics and policy since I was very young, and obviously, becoming involved in GW Democrats and now being president served as a good outlet for that. But what got me specifically interested in the issue of Social Security was I took a class at GW last year called Poverty, Welfare, and Work, and that was all about social insurance programs, social welfare, and how they work. And the professor of the class, Robert Stoker, he's written some good pieces on Social Security before on Huffington Post and other places, really effectively debunked a lot of myths about the program and chided the notion that benefits should be cut for anybody, particularly for middle-class folks. And so that class, combined with a lot of the rhetoric that I've seen from politicians, particularly on the right side of the aisle, but even some Democrats about Social Security, made me concerned about the fact that, we would see a cut to a program that's been very popular and has worked really well. And I think it's a shame that anybody would want to cut it, especially when millions of senior citizens rely on it as their sole income, and many are just barely above the poverty line only because of Social Security. So that's why I'm concerned about it.
Well, I got to say, I think you had a good professor and he had a good student, because I think you've got this topic pretty well nailed. Alex, why is it that we're being told that somehow older people are pulling one over on younger people when it's younger people who would pay a bigger price if Social Security would cut? How did we get here from reality?
Yeah, I think it's important to note, that, like you just did, that all the cuts that are being bandied about at the moment would fall hardest on the young. The younger a person is, the harder the cuts would hit them, in fact. So, that is rhetorically something that the proponents just won't talk about, that they're proposing cuts for younger people. The reasoning behind the strategic decision of pitting the old against the young is that they know, exactly as has been noted, that Social Security works. Social Security is massively popular across generational lines. It's popular amongst seniors who see it firsthand, but it's also popular amongst younger folks. Polling data of millennials shows that they love the program too. They probably have firsthand knowledge of a grandparent or a parent or a friend somebody who has accessed Social Security that they've earned and understands that this program is a fundamental part of America. But the opponents, the plutocrat and their front groups, they see this, and because they don't actually have a good understanding of the American people, they think that they can split the young and the old, and by doing that, they can lessen the support for Social Security by, in my eyes, basically saying to older folks, those 55 and older, oh, don't worry, we're not going to touch your Social Security, we're just going to touch and cut the people younger than 55, which is a fundamental misreading of Americans, that seniors who have firsthand knowledge of how important this program is would somehow throw their grandchildren under the bus. In fact, they're the biggest proponents of absolutely no cuts because they understand how important it is.
So, in the meantime, we have, to use your word, plutocrat groups like Third Way pushing these notions, and they've been pushing them in one form or another since long before that group existed, 20 years or more. And I always like to point out when we're talking about plutocrats that Pluto isn't a planet anymore. That shows how out of touch they are. But the piece of it that continues to be disturbing is that Omid, as you mentioned, now you're president of the Young Democrats at your university. There are Democrats who continue to support this idea. There's a very strong possibility that the Social Security benefit cut called the Change CPI will be in the president's budget this year, as it was last year. That's a warning sign. That Democrats should be nervous. And we got about 90 seconds left, 2 minutes left. Democrats should be a little nervous about that, don't you think?
Yes. I don't support Change CPI because it would not only undermine social insurance, but it would also not be good for the economy, because the folks should know that if you have more money in your pocket, then you're going to spend that and increase GDP, and that's better for everybody. So I would be concerned if Change CPI was in the president's budget. Again, I support the president on a lot of things. I think he's done a very good job, and I understand he's proposed that as a compromise measure. But the fact of the matter is it's not good public policy. I don't even think it's a good compromise either, because on the other side, they'll easily then say that, oh, Obama's going after senior citizens, because they have no trouble being disingenuous on the other side. So,
well, I'm going to close with this, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Omid, but we'll have you back. But I'm going to close with this. When Obama proposed it last time, I sent out a public bet on the Huffington Post. How long would it take the Republicans to say that the president is cutting Social Security? It took 15 minutes. 15 minutes after his announcement, one of the House Republican officials was saying the president is assaulting seniors. So we are going to, if you're a young Democrat or a Democrat of any age, you should be begging the president not to put this in his budget. And if you're an American of any age, you should be resisting cuts to Social Security. Alex Lawson, Omid, thanks so much for being with us. That was Alex Lawson and Omid Feruzzi. We'll be right back on the Zero Hour.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Yes, Mom. We're back on the Zero Hour. Love that reggae music. Our next guest is Robert Johnson, who has so many great credentials that if I were to give them to you all, it would use up the entire segment. So I'll stick with the highlights. Rob, who I know and have known for a while and think the world of, is president for the Institute for New Economic Thinking, which does a lot of terrific work. I believe, well, he'll tell us, but I believe it's inet.org, I-N-E-T, but he'll tell us. It does a lot of great work on getting the economics profession out of some habitual ruts and into new ways of looking at the economy, adapting to new realities. And he's also director of the Global Finance Project for the Roosevelt Institute. He's an economist of great background and very well respected in that field. He's also an former executive producer of the film Taxi to the Dark Side. And although it's not on his official resume, I was given one of the things we've had many deep talks about. He is a music producer, and as some of you know, I'm a guitar player and songwriter and done that for a living here and there. And so we've talked a lot about Ike Turner, who Rob brought back for some comeback albums, and blues music in general, including Otis Rush and some of the other greats. But we're here to talk about the Federal Reserve. Rob Johnson, are you with us?
I'm here, but you gotta, when you're talking finance, you gotta have the blues.
Man, if you don't have it before you start, you'll have it by the time you're done, right?
Well, Cornel West once said that it takes three things to live in a democracy. You have to be a prophetic witness, you have to have the humility of Socratic questioning, and you have to have the tragicomic sensibility of a blues artist. And I think the latter one's most important in these grim times.
You know what? I think I could end the show right now on that, because I think there's very little to add to that. But since we're here, and that is the sensibility I think we have to keep bringing. I mean, I think, we tend to get very lost, whether it's what's happening on the Hill, what's happening inside the mechanics of the Federal Reserve, or whatever it is. I think we have to keep stepping back and witnessing and examining. And as we examine the external, examine the internal, what's going on with us? What are our assumptions? What are we bringing to this? So with that in mind, Janet Yellen is the new head of the Federal Reserve. She testified before Congress for the first time this week. And I know what I thought, but I'm much more interested in what you thought.
Well, I think Janet Yellen is, first of all, a superb scholar and very experienced, but I think she constitutes a significant change in the focus of the Fed, and you heard echoes of that in the testimony. Many people have felt that if you take good care of the financial sector, then that confidence will transmit into taking good care of employment and economic activity. I think Janet goes to a different place. She goes to focusing on employment as the place where you measure the actions of the Fed, and she's less concerned with what you might say pampering the financial sector and more directly connected to employment. And I think this is a very big change in focus that we really haven't seen since probably the time of Arthur Burns.
Well, and it's interesting you mention that, because the Federal Reserve, of course, is supposed to have a dual mandate to manage a monetary situation, but also manage the employment situation. And a lot of people have felt that in recent years it's focused more on Wall Street and less on its employment mandate. But, it always seems, particularly if you're not on the inside of the profession, that the chair of the Federal Reserve in particular is called upon to speak in kind of oracular, indirect ways because of the impact of statements that are made. So, I always find myself sort of am I engaging in pattern recognition or projecting my own desires? But what I thought I heard, and I wanted your thoughts on this, is that I really thought when Janet Yellen spoke about employment and said so much about employment and talked about the measurements of employment and the limits of what we do or don't use, in a way I thought, without directly saying it, she was challenging lawmakers to say the central bank has a role in this, but you do too. Now, was I projecting, or was there?
Yes. No, I think that you're sensing another change in focus. The last two Fed chairmen, Bernanke and Greenspan, were both Republicans. And they characteristically were enthusiastic about tax cuts and simultaneously enthusiastic about deficit reduction. And they were very, very reluctant in this period since 2008, now I'm talking about Ben Bernanke, to encourage fiscal expansion. And as you know, in this very long and prolonged slack time since the financial crisis, we've had fiscal consolidation, and particularly at the state and local level. And so we're in a period of fiscal austerity, and the Fed's tools to mitigate recession and to promote employment in these very low interest rate conditions are limited. And I think this is another dimension where she's encouraging the lawmakers not to focus solely on the budget deficit, but focus on employment. And there's very good reason for that. Even people like Larry Summers, who is the other candidate to be the Fed chair, talks about hysteresis, which is a notion that people who are deeply unemployed for long periods of time lose their human capital, they lose their productivity, they lose their work habits, their families are demoralized, their kids aren't as well educated or as emotionally strong, and it harms society to have persistent unemployment for a long time. And Janet is very acutely aware of that based on her research record, and seems to be stepping into the water, as you said, as a Fed chairman, oracular, subtle, but the change in tone is very noticeable.
Now, what should people be looking for as they follow the quotations of Chair Janet Yellen and the actions of the Fed itself. Now, she was on the committee beforehand. She's been a part of the decision-making process, so she also emphasized continuity. She's got limitations, I'm sure, in her ability to act, both organizational and human resource limitations in terms of other. What can she do? What should people be looking for her to do or say in the coming months?
Well, I think to continue that emphasis on recovery and employment will be the centerpiece of her early signature. I also think that she simultaneously mentioned that the emergency buying programs, with the reversal, which is so-called tapering of purchases. If you see the word tapering, follow what she talks about, the staged tapering of purchases of mortgage debt and buying of long-term securities, government securities. So she'll be talking about withdrawing extraordinary conditions in a measured pace when she sees the tangible evidence that employment is improving. And I don't think she or anyone else sees a particular dangerous inflationary threat in the near to medium term.
Well, this is very helpful for me, certainly, because again, talking to the indirect way that a Federal Reserve Chair has to speak, if she says, I'm going to continue this program unless there are substantial changes, that roils the markets in one way. If she says, no, I'm going to continue this tapering as planned, that moves them in another way. So she's trying not to be clear, but what you're saying, I think, is fairly clear, that that her leading indicator right now to guide her in the coming months is employment.
Right. Well, you talk about the dual mandate, inflation and employment, and the trade-offs and balance between. We're still with enough slack in the economy that employment can be a very large portion of the focus, because the inflationary dangers appear to be some significant way off, and unemployment has to come down significantly before that danger would, which you might call, re-enter the mix in a formidable way.
Okay, well, Robin, we got about 90 seconds left, and in the time, just in a minute or so, I guess what that gets me to is, and if you can't answer it in a minute, just pass. But some of her predecessors, certainly I would include Greenspan in this, were very, very wrong in their predictions on inflation and their predictions on the impact of tax cuts and so on. What's it going to take for economics as a profession to get more dedicated to looking at outcomes and adapting itself when it's necessary?
Well, I think the first thing is humility, which comes from recognizing that the forecasting methods have very, very limited viability. These are not engineering systems. These are systems of human psychology, and therefore very subjective. We do not have mechanical markets, as my friend Roman Friedman, his book is called Beyond Mechanical Markets, said. And the other thing is we have a political economy. Anybody that wants to understand the Fed should read Bill Greider's famous book, Secrets of the Temple. But it's about subjective psychology. It's about norms. It's about things that can change. And pretending you have a mechanical system creates false precision and creates misleading confidence. And economists have to step back from that temptation in order to improve their own credibility, even if their forecasts are somewhat more vague.
Well, in other words, they have to have the courage to be humble, I guess is the way I would put that. Yeah. Rob Johnson, thanks so much for being with us. I hope you'll come back and once in a while and explain the secrets of the temple to us.
Be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was Robert Johnson, who runs the Institute for New Economic Thinking. You'll have to Google it because I forgot to ask him the address, but it's well worth checking out Rob's work there. It's very important as the profession itself reforms and adapts to a new reality. And as he said, to survive in this world nowadays, you have to have I'm going to have to ask him for that Cornel West quote, a prophetic sensibility and the blues man's view of the world, and I hope we'll be helping to bring people on who can help us do that. So, again, this is RJ Eskow. You've been listening to the Zero Hour. We have a great hour coming up for you. Please stick with us.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As VW workers in Chattanooga, Tennessee wrap up their vote on whether or not to join the UAW, pro-union workers remain upbeat and excited about joining the United Auto Workers. David Gleason is one of them.
I'm not concerned. I'm upbeat. Feelings in the plant are really high. You know, everybody's excited about it. They're excited about the change that's coming, getting ready for the Works Council and getting ready to welcome the UAW into the plant.
Mark Lemon is another VW worker in Tennessee who can't wait for the UAW to come in.
I'm ready for this to be UAW under the German Volkswagen umbrella, the Works Council also. The local support is tremendous, and there's not only local support, there's an international presence here, not only from Germany, from Sweden, elsewhere, and very impressive and warms my heart.
Eric DeLacy is amazed by what's happening with the VW-UAW organizing drive.
It's amazing just to be there at the start and at times think this was never going to happen or it was just taking forever, and then finally being at this time is almost breathtaking.
Desperate to come up with anything that might sway the vote against the UAW, U.S. Senator Bob Corker is claiming he's been assured that VW will reward the plant with a new SUV to build if the workers reject the UAW. VW says the union vote won't influence where the SUV is built, and the UAW's Gary Castile says Corker's claim is a direct contradiction of what VW has said. Labor law professor Harley Shakin says Corker's comments amounts to economic intimidation that undermines union representation in elections. Indiana labor law professor Ken Dow-Schmidt says Corker's comments could be grounds for running the VW-UAW election all over again because it could be seen as interfering to the point that it violates federal labor law. The International Longshoremen's Association, Local 333 in Baltimore this week, overwhelmingly rejected what was characterized as the best and final offer on a new local bulk cargo labor agreement from port employers. The National ILA says approving the contract would have meant giving back millions of dollars to the employers. For now, there's no strike or threat of strike. The union says it intends to keep working and keep negotiating. In October, union dock workers struck for 3 days, stopping work at the port. A federal arbitrator ruled the union owes $3.8 million in damages to Baltimore port employers stemming from that strike. Mississippi's Republican-controlled state Senate has passed some anti-union legislation that would let companies sue if they are coerced into staying neutral in a union organizing drive. Choosing union representation by signing cards is also banned by the legislation. Another piece of legislation passed by the state Senate in Mississippi bans mass picketing by unions that blocks entrances or damages property. Yet another anti-union bill bans cities and counties from requiring union labor on construction projects. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal, or shelter, or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10, and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the fax. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
Years ago, the delightfully naughty movie star Mae West said, "I used to be Snow White, but I drifted." Less delightful are some of the purity claims of such food manufacturing giants as PepsiCo, which has long marketed a line of its Frito-Lay snack foods as simply natural. Natural? Anyone who's even looked at one of the company's strangely puffed, caterpillar-esque cheese-powdered Cheetos would have a hard time believing nature had anything to do with the concoctions. Sure enough, PepsiCo has quietly dropped the volatile natural claim from its snack packages, rebranding them with just the word simply. The multi-billion-dollar food maker says the shift is merely a routine adjustment of its marketing scheme. But it comes only after consumer groups have taken Pepsi, Campbell Soup, and other manufacturers to court in the past couple of years, successfully challenging their use of the natural phrase as deceptive hype. PepsiCo settled one of its cases last year by paying out $9 million to the challengers and agreeing to stop labeling its Naked Juice brand as all natural. A marketing pitch for these drinks had bragged that they were, quote, the freshest, purest stuff in the world. The naked truth, however, was that they were not only juiced up with artificial vitamins and synthetic fibers, but also included an additive made from formaldehyde, a cancer-causing compound. This is Jim Hightower saying, the conglomerates say that advertising terms like natural are widely misunderstood by us stupid consumers. Well, there they go again, drifting from the truth and perverting plain English. Natural simply means what it says, natural, as in go squeeze an orange and don't dose it with formaldehyde and lies. To keep up with the industry's drift from purity, link up with Organic Consumers Association. They're at www.organicconsumers.org.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You are now listening to the Zero Hour with Richard Eskow, produced by the We Act Radio Network in Washington, D.C., and broadcast across the nation. Visit us online at thisisthezerohour.com or at youtube.com/thezerohour. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Eskow.
Are we back on the Zero Hour? We are back. All right, look, I'm RJ Eskow. This is the 0 Hour. And the 0 Hour, for those of you who don't know the expression, the 0 Hour, it has a couple meanings in technical definition. One, it's a military term, meaning the time when the countdown is up and it's time to get into action. Number two, in the more general sense that we mean, it means when time's up and it's time to do something about the situation at hand. And look, the situation at hand is elastic. It changes with time. It changes with events in the outer world, and it changes with our own inner state of mind. My inner state of mind, driven by a sinus infection that's laid me low all week. But we're here. The externalities in the immediate environment surrounding me right now, technical problems with my audio rig here. So that's why you had an extraordinarily long take of that very swinging big band music there. That's the way it is. The externalities in the greater world, hey, they are to a certain extent what we make it, and we're going to try to make them better. That's why we're here on We Act Radio. That's why we're here on the 0 Hour. And all right, we'll have a slightly shorter monologue today, but I don't think the world always needs to hear in depth of my wisdom. What I wanted to talk to you about a little bit before we switch into the show, and by the way, we do have a great show starting with a discussion of the Big Food. Is Big Food the new big tobacco? So we're going to get to all of that. But first I wanted to tell you that we've had some developments in the area of the minimum wage this week. As regular listeners of the show know, we have been falling behind in the minimum wage. Compared to what it was in 1968, it has not even kept pace with inflation. That's a shame. That's a tragedy. I have a piece now on the front page of the Huffington Post and also available at ourfuture.org, which is the website of the Campaign for America's Future, where I work, talking about the minimum wage. The president announced his support for the Harkin-Miller bill, which would raise the minimum wage to $10.10. That's a good example of Congress pushing the president in the right direction. His initial proposal was for a $9 minimum wage. Now, of course, we're saying the House GOP won't pass that, but there are 10 reasons why not only is $10.10 reasonable, because it starts to get that minimum wage back in line with inflation and pegs it to inflation, but it's actually the minimum wage we should be asking for. So I have a piece up right now called 10 Reasons, well, we could call it anything. I think I called it 10 Reasons to call for more than $10.10 in the minimum wage, because I think this is a lesson that the left tends to lose sight of. While the right is out there making extreme and unreasonable demands that the public hates, they're pushing the window of debate further and further to the right as Democrats run to compromise with them. Now, every Republican president, with the exception of Ronald Reagan, every Republican president since World War II has signed a minimum wage increase into law. There's no reason to be shy about it. Newt Gingrich's Republican Congress passed a minimum wage increase. George W. Bush signed a minimum wage increase that Michelle Bachmann voted for. So there's no reason to be shy about pushing for a minimum wage, and there's no reason to limit it to inflation. For 20 years, for 20 of the most successful economic years this country saw, from 1948 to 1968, the minimum wage kept pace not only with inflation, but with productivity. Had it kept pace with productivity from then until now, it wouldn't be $7.25. It wouldn't be $9. It wouldn't be $10.10. It would be over $21. If it had kept pace with the income increases among the top 1%, it would be $28. So there's no reason why we need to be shy about, as members of an independent and strong and progressive left, for saying $10.10. What do we think of that? Nice start. Because first of all, while that would get that minimum wage index inflation roughly from 1968 or so, it wouldn't make up for the years that have passed since then, when the when the middle class and lower income workers have fallen further and further behind, and minimum wage workers have been plunged into poverty. We've been lagging behind other industrialized countries. You know, that's something else that we need to be considering. Although we're behind most of them, France and Switzerland and Great Britain and so on, we are still, however, ahead of the Slovak Republic, as Laura Clausen pointed out on Daily Kos. So those are a couple other reasons we need to go at it. And, you know, even if we increase the minimum wage to $10.10, single parents will still need federal assistance. So we should be pushing for something higher. Not to forget also that not only are the top 1% doing far better than ever before, corporate profits are at or near record high levels. Public supports an increase in the minimum wage. The polling shows that. It will spur economic growth and widespread prosperity. And we mentioned that Gingrich's Congress and these Republican presidents have supported it. So why don't we? Why don't we say 1010 is a great bill, sign it into law, and then let's talk about what it really should be. I'm thinking, well, $21 may be too disruptive to the business economy, and we are reasonable people here on the left. So I'm thinking we should set the minimum wage for $16. And that as an independent left movement, that's what we should be pushing for. If the Democrats have to compromise, fine, we understand the art of compromise. We might even take $12.50 or $13, but right now, I don't know about you, I think 16 is a good number. We'll be right back talking about big food. Is it the new big tobacco? But in the meantime, think about the number 16. I think it's a lucky number. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying free consultations at 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/guardreserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the ARC. The ARC is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The ARC is also home to the ARC Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the ARC, so stop by and see them. The ARC, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the ARC's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The ARC, part of Southeast D.C. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
I'm RJ Eskow, and we are back on the Zero Hour. And as promised in this segment, we're going to talk about whether big food is the new big tobacco. Our next guest is, and she'll correct me if my pronunciation is dicey, with a last name spelled Eskow. I'm used to dicey pronunciations. But our next guest is Helena Botomiller-Evich, who is a food and agriculture reporter for Politico. And she did a very, very interesting story recently about whether the strategy that changed big tobacco and reined it in the decades ago could now be used against big food. And she says that there are naysayers now, but there were naysayers in 1994 when Mississippi's Attorney General started the move against big tobacco. So I wanted to talk to her about it. Helena, are you with us?
I'm here, and you got it right, except that it's Helena. Thank you. but really, it's the last two names that are hard. Thank you for having me.
But that's a great twist ending. Didn't see that coming. Thanks so much for joining us. And by the way, my name is pronounced Richard. It's easy. It's as it's. But
thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Your story was terrific, and the fact that you compared these lawyers are approaching so far 16 attorney generals, according to your story, and the fact that you compared what they're doing with what began in Mississippi in the 90s suggests that you think they have a chance. Could you tell us a little bit about what this initiative is?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting proposal. Basically, a Chicago-based law firm is trying to convince 16 state attorneys general to go after the food industry to recover some of their obesity-related Medicaid costs. So he's making this argument that the states are already paying a huge bill for the growing obesity epidemic, and maybe they could get some of that money back. Their central argument is that to a certain extent, the food industry has contributed to the rise in obesity, and the argument they're making is that maybe you could recover some of those costs. I think the comparison to big tobacco really comes from that they're using the same legal doctrine. They're making the same parallel, and if you read the proposal that they have sent to the states, they directly compare it to what happened in the 1990s with tobacco, which ultimately led to a $246 billion settlement with 46 states, as well as major policy changes. You can't market cigarettes to young people anymore, and the FDA now oversees tobacco. So there were a lot of changes that came out of that, and clearly tobacco and food are different, but they are very much making a comparison here.
Well, now, when we talk about the food industry, who exactly are we referring to?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it is definitely the most complicated question, I think, that comes out of this proposal. I mean, they don't name companies, they don't name certain types of products. They would have to really narrow down, how or who, who's the defendant, who are you suing? One of the experts they're working with is a man named Dr. Robert Lustig in San Francisco. He's a pediatric endocrinologist, and he thinks future litigation should be focused on diabetes and perhaps zero in on added sugars. So companies that were, adding sugar to their product. Again, though, which companies? So would they look at market share? Would they only go after big companies? There are a lot of questions, I think, that haven't been answered, with this proposal.
Right, and if we focus on sugar, it's interesting because a lot of people may have the initial reaction that, well, this is a bridge too far to make this comparison. But if you focus on sugar and what they're finding out about the addictive effects of sugar and the relationship between sugar and diabetes, that logic may make some sense. But But still, you might focus on candy companies, or you might focus on fast food restaurants that put a lot of sugar in their products, or people, I think, would be surprised to know how many different food products actually have sugar in it. Many that people don't consider sugary things, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, sugar, I think, is a lot more pervasive than people realize. There's some studies that have looked at packaged foods and found that, somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of all packaged foods in an American grocery store have added sweetener, added sugars. And people probably aren't aware of all of that. But then I think you mentioned the bridge too far. Are they putting sugar in products to make it addictive? Is it addictive? I mean, these are all really hard questions that, in court would be, it would be an intense, probably back and forth over those questions. It's hard. You mentioned more research is coming out. There's more research now. I think just last week there was a big study from CDC researchers linking sugar to, cardiovascular disease. We've had research linking to diabetes, but the question is the science there to support this kind of case?
Well, since we're making the analogy to big tobacco and what happened in the 90s, what was roughly the timeline from the 1994 first initiative in Mississippi to the resolution you described a few minutes ago?
Yeah, it was actually pretty quick in the litigation. I think litigation can drag out for years and years, but I believe the first lawsuit was filed by Mike Moore in 1994, and I think they had the master agreement with all the states by, it was either the end of 97 or 98. So, in 4 years, they were able to turn this around. But I think the debate around tobacco is at a very different place in the 90s. We'd already had whistleblowers come out. There had already been a Surgeon General's warning about tobacco. There had already been decades of speculation and debate over, the disease-causing problems with cigarettes. That the tobacco companies had concealed that they were addictive. They had concealed health, denied health effects for decades. So I think that is a big, big difference. I mean, the debate was very contentious, and I think, it was in a it's hard to compare that to food right now. I mean, people talk about obesity, but they don't talk about it in those terms, really.
What kept coming to mind as I read your piece was Michael Bloomberg, Mayor Michael Bloomberg's initiatives to ban I don't know why, but it kept coming to mind, his decision to ban attempt to ban extra large soft drinks in movie theaters, which I have to admit I didn't fully understand, because I didn't understand why you couldn't just buy two if you were really determined to drink a lot of it. But I understand they're pushing, you go to the movie theater, they push the big sizes and all that. Could this actually extend to retail distributors of food like movie theaters and restaurants?
I think that's another question that is not answered here. Americans are consuming more and more of their calories at restaurants or getting takeout, outside the home. So yeah, I mean, would restaurants be wrapped into this? Could you look at that buttery popcorn? I really don't know the answer to that. It would certainly complicate their case if you brought restaurants into it, because then do you bring grocery stores? Do you bring,
right,
the prepared food at grocery stores, the birthday cakes, I can't even imagine someone doing all of the math, trying to calculate percentages of, calories, and with that many variables, it would be really, really difficult.
And yet people have done the math on the health costs of sugar, as you mentioned earlier, for example, and it's staggeringly high. So in the 2 minutes or so we have left, 90 seconds we have left, what would a big tobacco-like outcome look like, do you think? What would it mean that sugary foods were regulated by the FDA? Would it mean that there was some sort of cost assessed for the health impact of this? What would an outcome look like?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to look into my crystal ball, I would guess that if they could ever force a settlement, there would clearly be a lot of money collected to states. That would probably be the first element. That's obviously what they're after. I think the only real hint we have about what else might be considered in a hypothetical future, settlement would be marketing to kids. So health advocates for a long time have been upset about the way unhealthy, high sugar, high salt foods have been marketed to children, and there's no real limit or restriction on that. And I think that that would be something that health advocates and probably state attorneys general, were they to ever decide to take this up, I think that that would be, it would be safe to assume that would be one of their goals, is to get limits on marketing.
Well, thanks so much. I hope you'll come back and talk to us more about this fascinating story. We've been talking with Helena Bottomiller-Evich of Politico about potential for a multi-state lawsuit against big food like big tobacco. Thanks so much. And Helena, I hope you'll come back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a good one.
You bet. This is RJ Eskow, and we will be back after this break on the Zero Hour.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Hank Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
I am RJ Eskow, and we are back on the Zero Hour. This is the Zero Hour, and by the way, that's our website. This is thezerohour.com. Our next guest is Jody Jacobson. Jody is the editor-in-chief of RH Reality Check, and I wanted to talk to Jody a little bit about, frankly, a topic that I find at times mind-melting, the way our culture and some of its pundits talk about women. Jody, are you with us? Jody?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, I hope you're still glad when we are done wallowing in the dark caves of the human spirit represented by people like James Taranto. We'll do our best to navigate it together, but frankly, I think this is an important story. And I wanted to talk to you about this, and perhaps if we have time, about one or two other topics as well. But James Taranto, who writes for the Wall Street Journal, wrote a piece called Drunkenness and Double Standards, which he called a balanced look at college sex offenses. Now, I said in my first opening monologue that I felt that in a sense he had taken the journalistic model of don't look for the facts, I felt there were two dimensions to this, but I want your thoughts. One is that this false neutrality and false objectivity is now extended to rapists, essentially, and number two, that it would be unlikely to happen were we not talking about any other segment of the population except women. Am I being unfair to James Taranto?
I don't think you're being unfair, no. I think, Mr. Taranto's view is one that unfortunately finds its roots in a lot of what we call rape apology and, rape equivalency, where people don't understand that the only consent is actually affirmative consent, and that Mr. Taranto is trying to create a situation in which, two people are drunk, they had sex, and it doesn't matter if there's consent because they somehow collided with each other. Apply that to any other crime. You're drunk and you were robbed. Is it your fault that you were robbed? You're drunk and you are assaulted, physically assaulted in some other way. Is it your fault? No. We would never apply that measure to any other form of criminal activity, assault, or theft. And yet, when it comes to rape, for some reason, we keep looking for reasons to exonerate people who do take advantage of other people and to blame the victim or to include the victim in the blame. And I think it's unfortunate because I think it really prevents us from not only acknowledging that sexual assault and rape is a big problem in this country, but from taking the kinds of steps that we need in so many areas of sex and reproduction to talk about respect, bodily integrity, and to make people clear about what the boundaries are.
See, here's where I go with this. I look at somebody like James Taranto, and he's by no means Tucker Carlson. I wrote a long piece about Tucker Carlson when he made similar remarks a few years ago. And I look at these men, and of course they're almost always men, if not always, and I basically see them looking at these cases and thinking, and again, I don't want to be unfair to James Taranto because I'm not suggesting that he is necessarily a rapist or insulter himself by any means, but no, I think there's a mindset that says, well, I could see myself in that situation, a kind of identification with the perpetrator, not because they do these things, but because they think, well, that could happen to a guy, that he drinks too much, she drinks too much. Next thing you know, you wake up the next morning and she's assaulting you. And yet, And I really think that's a factor, and yet they never think, for example, when it's, as you mentioned, let's say it's an assault case, they never think, well, I could get drunk and punch some guy, which is also possible. So I think there's I'm curious, from a male point of view, I think there's a complex psychology of identification going on here. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you or if you have any thoughts on that.
I agree with you. No, I agree with you. I think so much of our history and society is based on the notion that, men want sex and they have uncontrollable libido, and it's just a biological thing, and that women naturally are supposed to be the guardians of, virginity, or the guardians of what's what's proper, and so, it falls to the blame of a woman when she's not holding the line because men just can't help themselves. And inherent in all of this is this notion that men can't help themselves. And I just think that's blatantly untrue. I think we don't teach people respect and control, and therefore, and then we have a societal culture in which, people can say on the internet, "Oh, I want to rape you," and and people think it's a joke. I do think he's not, doesn't have to be a rapist or an assailant to have a psychological identification, as you noted, with that kind of situation, because I lost control. I was drunk. I lost control, and therefore, and naturally, I'm going to want sex. So I lost control. And I have kids. I have a daughter and a son, and I work really hard to think about how I teach them about these kinds of things, and how I make sure that I teach them both the same things without blaming either of them for, or trying to encourage either of them to think that they have more or less of a right to act in a certain way. But it's a very difficult thing. We really do need to be talking about what consent means. We need to be having clear discussions that, in the cases where rape or sexual assault happen, the victim is not to blame, just as the victim is not to blame in any other clear-cut crime. And we also obviously need to deal with the issue of drinking. I don't want either of my kids drinking to excess on college campuses or anywhere else for that matter, but if it does happen and somebody assaults them, the condition of being drunk is not an invitation to be assaulted. It may make you, less vulnerable, more vulnerable to being assaulted, but it's not a condition or an invitation to assault.
Well, and when I listen again, when I hear you say that, my mind melts slightly at the idea that it's even necessary to say that. I mean, James Taranto writes, what is called the problem of sexual assault, he puts quotes around the word sexual assault, on campus is in large part a problem of reckless alcohol consumption by men and women alike, which is a sort of pseudo-democratic way of saying, again, she asked for it. But again, I mean, you started the thought experiment, but I think it's worth pursuing. If I'm at a friend's in a friend's dorm room and we're both drunk and I take his iPad, that's theft. I mean, nobody says, well, he was drunk, he had it coming, or
right, exactly.
or he shouldn't have gotten drunk and subjected me to the temptation of taking his iPad. I mean, it's insane. But what is it exactly, in your view? What is it that a man pictures a woman being as a kind of creature to think this? I mean, is it that she is? You mentioned earlier that the guardian of virtue and so on. Is that it? That she's letting down her? She's being deficient in her moral responsibility to protect the prize, and that's so she has it coming? Is that?
Yeah, well, there's the undercurrent of that, which is that if you wear something like a short skirt, or you wear a top without a back, or you have drinks at a bar, or you're at a certain club, then you are quote unquote asking for it. And I do think it goes back to these kind of social norms and social constructs that we have about men and women and gender that feed into, people thinking that women are there to pleasure men or to guard against men being driven towards sexual. We don't allow women in this society to be sexual beings in and of themselves, and then we don't teach either girls or boys how to be respectfully sexual, both for themselves and otherwise. So if you look across the broader landscape of our social discussion about sex and things like reproduction, look at where we are. We're fighting about contraception. We can't have normal, healthy sex ed in our schools. We can't talk about sexual assault without leading politicians, suggesting that women ask for it. So we have a really, unfortunately, immature public discourse on these issues that then I think feeds into these situations where, boys think, well, boys will be boys, and this is what's happening.
Right, and the flip side of everything you just said is, well, then what you're telling me is that a woman is not allowed to go into these clubs. She's not allowed to dress a certain way. She's not allowed to act a certain way. She's not allowed to present herself in certain situations. And if she does, one of the penalties is she may get raped. So
exactly,
it's extraordinary. And I will just close. Well, I guess this is going to be an all Taranto rant on our part, but we'll close with this. Taranto says, if two drunk drivers are in a collision, this is his writing, one doesn't determine fault on the basis of demographic details, such as each driver's sex. You get how, Jody, how gender is now a demographic detail. But when two drunk college students, quote unquote, collide, which is his description of sex without consent, forced sex, when they collide, the male one is almost always presumed to be at fault. And we don't have time to get into this myth of the false reporting, which is a very tiny number of cases where it's even been a question. His diminished capacity owing to alcohol is not a mitigating factor, but her diminished capacity is an aggravating factor for him. Two things, and then I want your thoughts to close. One is, her diminished capacity is an aggravating factor, compounding the fact that she is physically smaller than him, number one, in most cases, or not as powerful physically. But number two, he says he's even an idiot about his own analogy, because he says when two drunken students collide, the male one is almost always presumed to fault. If you're in a drunk driving accident, you're going to jail.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the two things are absurdly unrelated. When I read that, I thought, seriously? I mean, again, the unfortunate reality of two people colliding in a car, they're both at fault, obviously. They both are taking irresponsible actions. Someone inserting their penis into somebody else or sexually assaulting somebody else, that is an action upon a different body. It doesn't matter whether that person is drunk or not. And that's the point. Drunkenness is not consent. Clothing is not consent. The only thing that is consent is an unequivocal, sober yes.
We'll have to leave it there. And to paraphrase the great Will Rogers, you're right to swing your penis ends where my body begins. So,
exactly.
Jody, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you
We'll be
for
right
having me.
back. This is the 0 Hour.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. With our federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Schuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Schuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders and best in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
All right, I'm Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow. We are back on We Act Radio, and this is the Zero Hour. And our next guest is Ben Wickler, and Ben is a fellow radio host in the We Act parallel universe. And, I was just reading Ben's biographical information. I know that he wrote some books, did some research for Al Franken's books, and then worked on Al's radio show. And Al was an old friend of my older brother's, so I remember Al from 30, 40 years ago. I haven't talked to him since he became a senator. I don't know how I would address him, but, Ben wrote that he loved comedy. Ben, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And, I was just talking about you. Funny you happened to show up. I was just saying that, I was reading your bio and that you started writing for The Onion when you were a kid and in high school, and that your first headline was, "I'm no proctologist, but I'll take a look," which I can picture Al using as a line, by the way. And I also wrote my first line of comedy when I was about 17. It was for a comedian. This will show you the difference in time. It was based on what was then the #1 hit song in the country, and I had him come out, and his first line was, "You're so vain, you probably think this joke is about you." But that was probably 30 decades difference or something. Okay, but you've got a great background in politics. You got a great background in broadcasting. And you said you loved the description in The Princess Bride, which already makes you a nerd, by the way, of what makes a great story: fencing, fighting, torture, revenge, giants, monsters, chases, escapes, true love, miracles, which I think is what it said underneath my yearbook photos. So I knew we'd get along, so I wanted to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Well, Thanks for having me on. And just for the record, it's not that I support torture. I just think that torture can be a part of Princess Bride-like epic stories.
Yes, of course. And I would actually leave the torture word out because we've had a rough few years in the world since The Princess Bride came out, and probably we don't need that anymore. But anyway, how's the show going? How's your show going?
Show's going great. And congratulations on your show as well. It's exciting to see it take off.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And listen, I wanted to have you out because I wanted to ask you this general all-purpose question that totally puts you on the spot and gets me off the hook, which is, you know how that works. But it's one that's been on my mind a lot, and with your background, I know you've thought about it, which is, why the hell is the left so bad at messaging?
You know, it's a great question with I think, a premise that is, you know, in part a reaction to the way that we wind up seeing messaging emerge in the world. So what I mean by that is, if you look at media in general, there are a bunch of journalists with no politics, and they see their mission as, you know, reporting the news as they see it and giving equal time to both sides. Then there's a bunch of, like, liberal journalists, and the liberal journalists think that they should report on news that's especially relevant to social justice issues, but they should, you know, make sure they're sticking to the truth as they see it and being fair to both sides. And then there's conservatives in media who are not journalists at all, and they see their job as messaging. They see their job as, you know, advancing their cause in the world. And so if you try to, like, you know, have one from the left, one from the middle, one from the right, it's kind of like there's a couple people that are, like, right around the center trying to prevent things from toppling from one side or the other, and then an elephant on one end jumping up and down.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. And we could, you know, talk about how that also happens in the political debate. But since we're focusing on the media right now, so what's the model? I mean, I think guys like you and me in different ways, and a number of others, are trying to figure out what's a model that says you can be a person who's dedicated to telling the truth and reporting the facts accurately, but there's a better way to do that and to include your messaging without morally compromising either the message or the truth.
So I think you can be fair without being balanced. And I think, in fact, fairness to the truth often means not being balanced, because often just, you know, there's more truth on one side than another. And I think that that's often the thing that, you know, progressives in media miss. I think there's a thing where politicians try to get taken seriously by press, and because there isn't the same kind of, you know, energetic, like, politically motivated progressive press out there, lefty politicians who want to pander to reporters actually won't, you know, repeat and hammer the same core effective message. Whereas on the right, you're rewarded for doing that. If you go on Fox News and Hannity, you know, and Rush Limbaugh's show, you're totally rewarded for repeating the core message of the day on the conservative side. I think that in progressive press, the thing for folks like us is, A, to keep our eye on the ball about the fights that really matter, and, you know, communicate the things that really resonate, and then B, to have fun while we do it. Because I think that's, like, someone once asked me, why is it that liberal, you know, sort of journalists and firebrands often are kind of humorless, and on the right they seem to be having fun? And my answer is that if you're a liberal and you're really funny, you might go into professional comedy, because in the professional comedy world, almost everyone is a liberal, right? And
right, but
like conservative,
you already answered the question wrong, Ben, because if the question is, do you know why there aren't more funny liberals? The only right answer is no, but if you hum a few bars, I can fake it. Sorry. Listen, we're going to have to wrap it up, but in 60 seconds or less, what do you think the messaging, you mentioned we have to stick to the important messages of the day. What are the 3 important messages of the day?
So the biggest thing, the core thing, is the idea that we're all in this together instead of everyone being on their own. And the second thing is to point out that some people have rigged the rules and they're getting all the benefits from it. And when you remember those 2 things, it kind of explains a lot about just about every fight that matters in this country.
All right. We're gonna have to leave it there, Ben, but I hope you'll come back and talk to us another time, because I mean, I think this conversation about how we focus our communication is the conversation to be having. So thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you come back.
Appreciate it. My pleasure.
This is R.J. Eskow, and that was Ben Wickler. Please listen to his show, The Good Fight, and come right back. We'll be back after these messages on the 0 Hour.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Newsflash for straight guys. Newsflash for straight guys. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The next sentence in New York Times columnist Frank Bruni's recent piece titled Panic in the Locker Room is, "You've been naked in front of a gay man." Actually, probably in front of many gay men, either long ago in gym class or more recently at the health club or somewhere else. The reason for all this locker room talk is, of course, college football star Michael Sam, who is about to be drafted by the National Football League. That is, the homophobic macho is as macho does National Football League, where a New Orleans Saints linebacker said, "Imagine if he's the guy next to me and, I get dressed naked, taking a shower, the whole nine. It's just so he looks at me. How am I supposed to respond?" Bruni answers, "A squeal would be unmanly. And NFL players tend to use their firearms away from the stadium. So I would advise them to do what countless females have done with leering males throughout history. Step away, move on, dare I say, woman up." Bruni points out that anxiety in the locker room, a place more bedlam than boudoir, makes no sense. I can only add that the stereotype of gay men as characterized by leering and libido is crumbling, even in the homophobic bastion called the National Football League, to which we can all say, it can't happen soon enough. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union, because freedom can't protect itself.
Packers.
Vikings. We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown. We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full. But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As VW workers in Chattanooga, Tennessee wrap up their vote on whether or not to join the UAW, pro-union workers remain upbeat and excited about joining the United Auto Workers. David Gleason is one of them.
I'm not concerned. I'm upbeat. Feelings in the plant are really high. Everybody's excited about it. They're excited about the change that's coming, getting ready for the Works Council and getting ready to welcome the UAW into the plant.
Mark Lemon is another VW worker in Tennessee who can't wait for the UAW to come in.
I'm ready for this to be UAW under the German Volkswagen umbrella, the Works Council also. The local support is tremendous, and there's not only local support, there's an international presence here, not only from Germany, from Sweden, elsewhere, and very impressive and warms my heart.
Eric DeLacy is amazed by what's happening with the VW-UAW organizing drive.
It's amazing just to be there at the start and at times think this was never going to happen or it was just taking forever, and then finally being at this time is almost breathtaking.
Desperate to come up with anything that might sway the vote against the UAW, U.S. Senator Bob Corker is claiming he's been assured that VW will reward the plant with a new SUV to build if the workers reject the UAW. VW says the union vote won't influence where the SUV is built, and the UAW's Gary Castile says Corker's claim is a direct contradiction of what VW has said. Labor law professor Harley Shakin says Corker's comments amounts to economic intimidation that undermines union representation elections. Indiana labor law professor Ken Dow-Schmidt says Corker's comments could be grounds for running the VW-UAW election all over again because it could be seen as interfering to the point that it violates federal labor law. The International Longshoremen's Association, Local 333 in Baltimore this week, overwhelmingly rejected what was characterized as the best and final offer on a new local bulk cargo labor agreement from port employers. The National ILA says approving the contract would have meant giving back millions of dollars to the employers. For now, there's no strike or threat of strike. The union says it intends to keep working and keep negotiating. In October, union dock workers struck for 3 days, stopping work at the port. A federal arbitrator ruled the union owes $3.8 million in damages to Baltimore port employers stemming from that strike. Mississippi's Republican-controlled state Senate has passed some anti-union legislation that would let companies sue if they are coerced into staying neutral in a union organizing drive. Choosing union representation by signing cards is also banned by the legislation. Another piece of legislation passed by the state Senate in Mississippi bans mass picketing by unions that blocks entrances or damages property. Yet another anti-union bill bans cities and counties from requiring union labor on construction projects. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced a plan to offer IDs to all residents, regardless of their immigration status. On Fox's The Real Story, host Gretchen Carlson falsely suggested that the plan is intended to permit undocumented immigrants to vote. She asked guest Emily Tish Sussman,
So, Emily, am I to assume that the reason that de Blasio would want this is so that people can move on to vote? I mean, I don't really understand what do you think his whole effort is in this?
Well, we do really see that having these either ID cards or driver's license for the undocumented does actually promote public safety. You know, those who are involved in fatal car crashes, 1 in 5 have not gone through the proper training of a driver's license. It would bring them into that kind of system. It would have more economic security for those. It would have better trust with the police. Like, it really does bring them in a number of ways.
Carlson's concern about undocumented immigrants voting is baseless, since to register to vote in New York City, you must already be a U.S. citizen. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
You are now listening to The Zero Hour with Richard Eskow, produced by We Act Radio in Washington, D.C. and broadcast across the nation. Visit us online at thisisthezerohour.com or at youtube.com/thezerohour. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Eskow.
Wow. I have so got to get used to that introduction because, hey, you know, I feel like I've taken over the late night slot, but of course that's Jimmy Fallon. So what do we want to talk about? We got another monologue. For one thing, it's what do you want to talk about? Well, I'll tell you what I'll talk about. I'll talk about a couple things. One is it is Valentine's Day. It is Valentine's Day. So, honey, I love you. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'll tell the world. And yes, Valentine's Day is a corporate holiday. I read a great piece in Salon about by a woman. It had a kind of O. Henry feel to it. You'll see what I mean in a second. O. Henry wrote that story about the couple where she had the beautiful hair and he had the beautiful watch, and she sells her hair to buy him something, or I forget. Anyway, you get the idea. Anyway, so he never wanted to celebrate Valentine's Day because he thought it was corporate and commercial, and her feelings were always hurt. And finally, last Valentine's Day, he woke her up with flowers and a card, and the gift she had given him was nothing because she was accepting that he didn't care for Valentine's Day. Well, you know, I think there's something, I know where he's coming from, but I know where she's coming from, and I think that it's okay sometimes to share with the rest of your society something that they celebrate. You don't have to be overly corporate about it. You can get a nice, thoughtful card. You can Now, flowers, there was an interesting piece in Elephant Journal, which is a Buddhist online publication, about some of the terrible things that happen to workers in the flower production industry in South America and elsewhere. But you can do it with locally grown, organically grown flowers. You can be conscious about Valentine's Day as a consumer, earth-friendly, moral, worker-friendly consumer, as you can about anything else. So what the heck? There's nothing wrong with celebrating Valentine's Day if you want to, and if you remain conscious about that, as you should about everything. And there's nothing wrong with not celebrating it. It's a free country. So there's that. I did want to talk about that. I did also want to mention that a week ago, a little more than a week ago, what's the date today? Just about a week ago, we had the 103rd birthday of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was, in many ways, I suppose, a very congenial human being, from what I've heard, although he could be other than that as well. I did meet Nancy Reagan. I met her. I was the assistant director of a charity production, a play reading at the UCLA Ronald Reagan Medical Center, and she showed up, and she was gracious and smart, funny, liked her very much. But nevertheless, when it comes to writing about Ronald Reagan, as I did this week, I describe what I call the failed legacy of our first corporate politician, because that's really, I mean, if we think about it, Republicans like to talk about the Reagan legacy. Well, he left two legacies. One was a rhetoric of hostility towards everything government does, rhetoric which unfortunately at times has been adopted by too many Democrats in the Clinton-Obama vein, as well as a lot of Republicans, and it's a mistake. It was a mistake for Bill Clinton to talk about limited government. It's a mistake for Obama's rhetoric not to include the fact that government jobs, like teachers, postal workers, are good jobs too and contribute to the economy. So he does have that rhetorical and ideological legacy of moving the country sharply to the right. But I wouldn't say that that was his personal legacy, because that was really an agenda that was thrust upon him. He does have the agenda, the legacy of being the first corporate politician, in that he was a gifted and malleable and very bright. Let's not kid ourselves. People like to talk about Reagan as unintelligent. He was not an unintelligent man. He was smart. He was malleable. He was presentable. He was well-spoken. In other words, he was the ideal salesman. So the idea of a political leader as corporate salesman, in my opinion, was pioneered by Ronald Reagan, and at times has been adopted by virtually every major Republican politician, with the exception of some Tea Partiers, who scare that cynical wing of the party that I was talking about at the top of the first hour, and with the exception of a few Democrats. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of Bill Clinton's post-presidential presentations in favor of, for example, the Simpson Bowles austerity measures and so on, should be seen as another example of a celebrity politician functioning as a corporate salesperson for that agenda. I think that is a real legacy of the Reagan presidency. I don't know if Reagan hadn't come along to pioneer it. I don't know if there was anyone else with that same kind of gift who could have shifted our politics in that way. But what's the legacy now? Remember, when he nominated Barry Goldwater in 1964, which is the speech that made people in the right and in the conservative world see him as a prospective president, he said this, quote, the founding fathers, he had a great speaking voice, the founding fathers knew a government can't control the economy without controlling people. When a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. So we have come to a time for choosing. Those are very anti-government and hostile words with an undercurrent of violence to them. And as I wrote earlier this week, with rhetoric like that, is it any wonder that according to polls, 44% of today's Republicans believe that, and I quote, in the next few years, an armed revolution might be necessary in order to protect our liberties. So, you know, it's a frightening world we've come to. And in a time when this kind of far-right extremism is gaining more and more credence, I think it's very, very important to say that we don't believe in that, to say that we don't support that, and to say that we are not afraid of telling the world that that we believe that government has a positive and even a beautiful role to play in human lives. I think that is part of what we need to be saying to ourselves and to each other. And I think it's Ronald Reagan's legacy that we're shy and or potentially even ashamed to do that. And I think we should be doing our best to change, undo, and reverse that legacy. In the meantime, what can we do? We can say, without being personally vindictive towards anyone, we wish his spirit the best wherever it may be, but his political legacy is ours to overthrow, and I believe we're up to the task, and that is our task. We will return on the 0 Hour shortly to talk about the Snowden era of journalism. Excellent piece in Politico about that, and in keeping with our universal, one might say even cosmic outlook, we will also be talking with a writer from Discover Magazine about the possibility of alien worlds and realities on Earth. So please stick with us. We have an interesting hour coming up. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the 0 Hour.
Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on healthcare while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
And we are back on the Zero Hour. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about whether we have entered what has been described by our next guest as the post-Edward Snowden era of journalism. Darren Samuelson, who is senior policy reporter for Politico, believes and writes that we are in a post-Snowden era now where no detail is too small to be published regarding national security in the NSA. He co-wrote a very interesting piece with Dylan Byers in Politico about this. Darren, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you write, of course. Now, you write that we've entered the Edward Snowden era of national security journalism, a time when no scoop is too small, no detail too minor, and revelations about government surveillance pour forth on an almost daily basis, and that is a significant departure from the way things used to be. How so? Didn't the Watergate revelations get extensive coverage in the New York Times back in the 70s?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Watergate certainly changed, I think, the way journalism was conducted, certainly on a level in terms of covering political campaigns and in terms of how a president running for re-election used the powers that he had to sway an electorate. And I think what you're seeing, though, here in the last 9 months as these Snowden-inspired stories have appeared in The Guardian, have appeared in The Washington Post, in The New York Times, and countless other media outlets now, is just an overwhelming amount of material. If you just kind of just scan through and on any given day, some of the details that are coming out now, it's fascinating to look at that and compare it to sort of the period after 9/11. In the years sort of right after that, where I think a lot of reporters, justifiably were concerned about what they were going to be putting out. They were getting pushback, obviously, from the Bush administration, not to publish details of what the government was trying to do as it vastly expanded its surveillance operations. But with the Snowden documents, I mean, specifically having those documents now in hand, at least in the hands of these reporters who have gotten access to them, it makes a big difference that you can actually point to things, link to them, put PDFs up on your website, and that actually show details of what the NSA is doing, what the British counterpart is doing, and it's really just kind of taken things to a whole nother level. You hear it from the reporters who are covering this issue, that they're finding that the government is more willing even to engage with them at this point, as we are now into our 9th month since the first stories appeared in The Guardian back in June of last year.
Well, I noticed that in your story, and I guess the question would be if the government's more willing to engage with them on this story, on this kind of story going forward as a result of the Snowden revelations, isn't that a good thing?
You would think so. I mean, certainly the government is engaging. They obviously would have engaged in the past, but not with a whole lot of cooperation. You'd often get things like off the record, no comments from the administration, from the NSA, which obviously doesn't really help your story along very much. But now, I mean, the NSA has a website that it's created where it's been posting, every couple of days, new unclassified or declassified documents, that you can, sort of follow along as they decide, obviously on their terms, what they're willing to put out there. It's obviously different information than what the Snowden documents, or the extent of what the Snowden documents would tell you. You obviously are seeing as well the head of the NSA, General Alexander, engaging with reporters, appearing on 60 Minutes back in December. It was obviously a story that a lot of people thought might have been a little bit of a puff article, or sorry, a puff story to benefit the NSA. But you do see the agency trying to at least get in front of the story and explain why these programs are necessary for national security purposes. And they've been up on the Hill, obviously testifying quite a bit as well. And every time that they're up, they're answering questions in a public forum in front of some committees, in front of the Senate and House Judiciary Committees, in front of the Armed Services Committees. Still, a lot of what's going on behind the doors of the Intelligence Committee is less public. But you do see...
You know, Darren, if I can just jump in for a second. I one of the reactions I had when I was reading your piece was that I thought you had a very interesting thesis and maybe the wrong target for it. And I'll tell you what I mean. You said that that no detail was now too small to publish, but you also said that Snowden made off with an estimated 1.7 million documents, but yet only a couple dozen have been released, and they've made up the backbone for about 200 original stories. So it sounds like, when you were making that statement, I thought, wouldn't WikiLeaks be a better example? Because WikiLeaks put everything out there, and I can see a much more personally a much more two-sided discussion about that. Maybe that's because I used to do consulting work for the State Department, and I could understand why someone might not want every single cable they ever wrote about the girlfriends or mistresses or illicit relationships of this one and that one to wind up on the internet. But I was just wondering, Bart Gellman in your piece from the New York Times says that he's actually been treating this like traditional stories. So I'm wondering if really the issue here isn't the internet age and what a WikiLeaks can do versus what reporters might do with a story.
Well, that's obviously a huge difference between WikiLeaks and the Snowden documents is the Snowden documents are in the hands of a select group of reporters who are making determinations about which documents to then publish. Obviously, he's been able to, Edward Snowden has given the documents to a couple of different reporters with, I would say, maybe a little bit different political difference between Glenn Greenwald getting access to these documents and then Bart Gellman getting access to these documents. And you actually do see some competition between them in terms of what Greenwald has been putting up, I think, with a lot more detail than what Barton Gellman has been putting up. And Barton Gellman from the Washington Post indicated that he's holding back some of these stories, that he doesn't feel the need to kind of go scoop for scoop against Greenwald and the Guardian as he's publishing the stories that he is. And obviously they're all making editorial decisions of what has the greatest impact, and that is a big difference between WikiLeaks and just a whole avalanche of information that was put up and out there on all the different cables. The other thing I would say is, and I got this from a lot of the reporters that I heard from and spoke with, was with the initial blast of stories that they were able to put out. I mean, maybe they were a little bit more self-evident in what the documents showed, and what now is happening is, with the other documents that they have that haven't been released publicly yet, it's requiring more reporting, which is not easy to obviously cover the national security beat, where you're dealing with people who can't talk or won't talk, or if they do talk, it's in a very protective way. You have to do a lot more legwork to figure out what exactly these documents say and put them into the proper context. And obviously, that's kind of what's going on now, and that's why I think you're seeing, again, more stories appearing here in the months after the first batch came out in June, and maybe each additional story gets down to another level of granularity of what our surveillance operations are all about, whether they be here or overseas.
Well, is it your sense from those you've talked to who might have seen more of the documents, was it your sense that the big revelations have all been revealed, or is your sense that there are still important stories out there where people are looking for corroborating information or not ready to move with them yet?
I think it's the latter. I get the sense that there are still some pretty big blockbusters out there, but they require more work. And as a reporter who spends a couple of weeks on a story, you're always trying to get your piece up and out as fast as you can, but you got to be careful, and you got to, it's obviously a contrast from the digital age that we're in right now, where so many journalists, are pumping out stories, within moments of someone saying something. These are much more complicated pieces that do require, second, third, fourth, fifth, 25 sources, upwards to really make you understand and help you, navigate what are some pretty tricky, complicated pieces of subject matter, and also I think to make it something that's understandable to readers. I mean, you've got to imagine that once you get into the nuances here, you're going to lose a lot of readers, and I think that that's probably one of the challenges that the reporters who do have the documents, and I'm not one of them, but the reporters who do have the documents, are facing right now, is to try and tell this story in a way that makes sense and is something that is digestible to an everyday reader.
Well, this is one of those news stories that's so important and so fascinating that the story of the story is equally fascinating, and you have the security administration and those players. You have the reporters, the varying reporters. I hope you'll stay on this and keep us informed in the weeks and months to come.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, we will be definitely staying on this story.
You bet. And that was Darren Samuelson with Politico talking to us about the revelations in the Snowden era of journalism. I'm RJ Eskow, and we will be right back on the Zero Hour.
You're listening to WIAT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
If you're a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan, like me, coming home can be harder than expected. But it turns out I wasn't alone. At IAVA.org, there's a free online community of thousands of vets who've got your back.
Whether it's managing the transition home or everyday stuff
like finding a nice sweater for my dog.
Sweater?
Okay, maybe not that. Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America is there for you. Join our community at IAVA.org.
We've got your back.
Brought to you by IAVA and the Ad Council.
All right, I do believe we are back on the Zero Hour. And look, with that last segment, we were talking about the Snowden era of journalism. Snowden's revelations, 1.7 million documents. We've seen about 200 of those so far, revealing hidden, one might say even alien worlds in our national security system, which was my way of making a segue to the next story, because as you know, here on the Zero Hour, or as you don't know, and you are now learning, we love to talk about new developments in science, cool science stories, humanity's future in its various forms. And that brings us to our next guest. Gemma Tarlak is Senior Associate Editor with Discover Magazine. Gemma, by the way, herself has a fascinating background. She was a chambermaid in Munich, which, believe me, you can tell stories if you've done that. Went to culinary school, got a master's in journalism, has lived all around the world, and they always told us, live before you write. So, Gemma, I guess that's what you've been doing, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, though I have to admit I was not expecting to hear my early resume. The chambermaid days were a long time ago.
Well, somebody sent it to us, and look, there are things on my resume, too, that probably I wouldn't want to hear again. But thanks for having us. And, hey, listen, I really did want to talk to you about this very, very interesting story you guys ran, that you were the editor on, about alien worlds in an unexpected place, namely here on Earth, and about Chris McKay, the astrobiologist who studies alien planetary environments by finding places very much like them here on Earth. Cool story, huh?
Yeah, it was a really fascinating story to work on because, for a number of reasons. One, because a lot of his work involves traveling to Antarctica, where I lived for 20 months, and it's a place I absolutely fell in love with. So I love the chance to kind of nostalgically return there through the author's eyes. But also, it's a fascinating thought because people who are looking for extraterrestrial life are always looking to the skies. So many people don't even think, hey, what would life look like on another planet? Why don't we look on Earth for an analog to get an idea of the cold extreme or the heat extreme or the dry extreme where life could thrive?
Or New Jersey. No.
Hey now.
So, I'm sorry. I do that every time we talk about alien worlds, and yet I lived in New Jersey. I love New Jersey. My brother lives there. I'm going to hear about that. Okay. So what are some of the places that you mentioned Antarctica, and someday we'll have to talk about what you did there. But yeah, that's certainly not I guess one of the reasons you go to a place like Antarctica, besides the extremes of weather, and we know that some of the other planets are very cold, is that it would be a replication of the experience of living in an artificial environment for an extended period of time, right? So if you had to put an astronaut on Mars or someplace like that, you'd want to know what it's like, which you personally do, to live in an artificial environment large percentages of the time. But, I'm being serious also.
Right.
This is psychologically, biologically, what the human body goes through. Is that part of the logic behind going to a place like Antarctica?
Well, Dr. McKay's focus is not so much on how humans would survive on Mars or, say, one of Saturn's moons, etc. He's really looking at what are the fingerprints of life in this extreme environment that might be applicable if we're looking for life on Mars or life on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. So when he goes to a place like Antarctica, for example, he actually drilled through the ice and dove into Lake Untersee, which is one of the many lakes buried beneath glacial ice in Antarctica. And what they were looking for, he and his team, were signs of life. And they found these bacterial mats, they're called. This sort of basically like a thick, real grungy carpeting on the bottom of the lake, that there were it's a hard word to say, microbiomal life forms thriving in an anaerobic, no oxygen, no light environment. And that environment might be the same kind of environment that you would find on Mars. So they were looking at, well, how could we tell there was life on Mars if it was living in the same environment as it is in Lake Untersee? So his focus is not so much on how manned missions would survive on other planets, but really what are the fingerprints of life on other planets, and can we find those same fingerprints here on Earth?
And so we had an astronomer on last week talking with us about the possibilities of finding extraterrestrial life in different planetary environments, and including they're finding a lot of Earth-like planets, and by that we don't normally mean Antarctica or the desert, but we mean, habitable, what we consider habitable portions of Earth. But one of the things I think that Dr. McKay is finding is that life can exist in very extreme environments here on Earth, and that raises the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe, right?
Absolutely. And he's not just looking also for the fingerprints of life, but he's looking for geological formations on Earth that might help us understand geological formations elsewhere. For example, there is a volcano in Tanzania called El Doño Lengai, and it is unique on Earth in that it is the only volcano that spews carbonatite lava. Most volcanoes here on Earth spew basalt lava, but the lava coming out of this Tanzanian volcano has a different mineral composition. Well, so what? The thing is, this lava is extremely runny. It's like motor oil. And that allows this particular kind of lava to travel very long distances. Now on Venus, they have thousands and thousands of miles of these lava channels from the volcanoes on Venus. And before they started looking at this Tanzanian volcano, researchers couldn't understand how it would be possible on Venus for the lava to travel thousands of miles. Because, lava just kind of goes so far and then it freezes, or seizes up, really. So they think this Tanzanian volcano may be able to explain the volcanoes on Venus. So he does look for life, but he also looks for ways of understanding other planets by looking at extreme environments on Earth.
So this guy basically has the job of visiting alien planets without ever leaving the Earth.
Exactly. I envy him. He has the greatest job in the world, I think. He gets to go to so many cool places.
So what's he looking at next? What's did you get any indication of what he's after next, or where he's going, or where this story is taking us?
Well, he's one of those researchers that is always going in a zillion different directions, because he's really got an incredible enthusiasm and passion for his job. And with that in mind, he is returning to a lot of places he's been before. The Mojave Desert, for example, is not that far from where he's based in California, and he frequently travels there. But right now he's waiting for some results from a drilling mission in Antarctica called the Icebreaker, and they're hoping that the attempt at drilling in Antarctica might be applicable to equipment they could develop for a future mission to Mars that'll help us get down underneath the surface of ice on Mars and maybe find, who knows what we'll find if we get down under there.
Well, and I know he's also looking at potentially terraforming Mars and changing its physical environment, maybe doing that here on Earth as well. So the guy's, I got to say, he's involved in a lot of interesting stuff, and I hope you guys are going to stay on the story so that we can keep learning about it.
Oh, we definitely will.
All right. Well, Jonah, thanks so much for coming on the show and telling us about life in alien environments around the Earth, and even as a music chambermaid. So, thanks for joining us, and I hope you'll come back.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm RJ Eskow, and we'll be right back. This is the Zero Hour.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying free consultation at 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
And we are back on the Zero Hour. And our next guest wrote a very interesting piece in Salon. Ben Schreckinger, who has a distinguished background in journalism, but I'm not going to go through it because I think the story is so interesting. I want to talk about it. Ben wrote that there will never be, well, the headline of his piece was, there will never be another, we all know, writers, we all know we don't always write our own headlines, but the headline was, there will never, ever be another American Revolution. Our bars are too loud and our cafes are too quiet. That speaks for itself. Ben concludes that maybe all this country needs to deliver the periodic rebellion the founders counted on is a few more good proprietors willing to get America's talking, conflicting, and subverting again. I drink to that. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Well, this is your thesis. I think I basically laid it out, but you're saying that our bars have gotten louder so you can't talk. How do we know that?
How do we know that? Well, one, from a lot of personal experience. I'm 24, and so I spend, I guess, an inordinate amount of time in bars, and it's a pretty common complaint among my friends, not really from a political point of view, just from how pleasant the experience is to go into bars where there's no dance floor, but there's very loud music. But there's also been some more rigorous evidence. The New York Times in 2012 went around to a lot of nightlife spots in New York and found dangerously high decibel levels. And in part, it's being driven by some research that shows that if you do turn up the music really loud in bars and restaurants, people will drink more and talk less and turn over more quickly.
Well, and I guess they will. Meanwhile, you're saying the cafes have gotten quieter, partially because people are on their laptops now and it's become an extension of the office space. And you're right, for centuries, coffee was used as a conversation stimulant. In fact, coffee was an illegal, a controlled substance for a long time in, I guess, the Jacobean era, among others. And so you're saying now that, okay, so you can get overheard in cafes, you can't be heard at all in bars, so where are the people of the present and future going to go to plot the rebellions and uprisings of tomorrow? I don't know, maybe Koch brothers funded get-togethers or something, Tea Party events, I don't know. But it's an intriguing question. Do you really believe that this could change the course of history?
Yes, I think that there are subtle social changes and technology-driven changes that really do drive the course of history, and I think that one of those factors that we frequently don't take into account is the construction of space. Because it's something that's in the background. It's not something that's easy to point a finger at. But I think that what has come to replace these sort of semi-public, semi-private spaces is the online space. And I talk a little bit in the piece about what's different between the online space and these physical spaces. And one of those things is that the online space is more susceptible to surveillance, which means that if you're talking about something that is truly dissident or truly subversive, you may not feel as comfortable doing that online, and that if that there's just not the potential for spontaneous mass gatherings, something like the Stonewall riots, which was a spontaneous mass gathering that set off the LGBT rights movement, can't happen online in a space where people are, far flung and only communicating but not physically together.
Well, one of the interesting, I had a couple thoughts reading your piece. One was the Iranian Revolution of 1979. People don't realize it now, and I don't think it's been written about enough. Maybe I'll write about it. But one of the reasons why it was a religious revolution was because the mosques and religious spaces were the only ones that weren't being spied upon by the Shah's security forces, And Ayatollah Khomeini, who was a refugee at the time, his messages were being sent around in cassette tapes and so on, and being played in the mosque, which was the only space for plotting an insurrection. And for example, a lot of liberal thinkers thought, well, he's a benign old fellow and will use this mode of communication and then have a liberal democracy, which, as we know, isn't necessarily how it worked out. So in the Occupy, one of the interesting things about Occupy is that, of course, it created its own physical space immediately and its own non-technological form of communication immediately with the consensus votes and so on. Whatever problems it had, they did create a space. So I guess my question for you, with all that long wind-up, is can you imagine any spaces of the future that we haven't thought about yet?
Sure. Yeah, I think that part of why Occupy was really grabbed our attention was that it created this space, but then winter rolled around and various municipal police departments basically pushed the Occupy protesters out of the space they had created, and I think that's part of the reason that the movement hasn't sustained the momentum it had in 2011. In the future, that's a great question. I think that there's an unchanging human need to have a third space, a space besides home and work that is a physical space to congregate and to mix with friends. And I have to hope that we will find those spaces, but I'm not sure what in 20 years in the United States will take that role.
Well, first, I love that phrase. I think you and I right here and now should vow to start the third space movement, because I do believe it's part of the human experience to have social spaces. And you mentioned the proprietors who might be willing to have a civil level of volume rather than too loud or too soft. I got to tell you, there's also that piece of it, because I'm sure that this very loud music does increase turnover, but it doesn't increase turnover for me because I don't go anymore, because who wants to be blasted with that stuff? And I go to talk and see people, and so they don't turn me over because they don't get me, and I don't buy a drink there because I'm not there. So I can't be the only one. So I would imagine that, particularly in urban areas, a third space proprietor, I'm going to capital T, capital S, might be able to attract people like us who don't want to be deafened or heard by everybody in the room, which seem to be the only two choices. So, but of course, we don't know what those spaces will be. So what's next for you with this? Was this just a one-off piece, or do you have any other thoughts about what you might write about the social spaces? And I use that not just in the physical, but metaphorical sense, including internet or whatever, the social spaces for collaboration, collusion, and revolution?
I haven't conceived of the next piece that will sort of build off of this. I do think that having identified what I'm calling a problem, that it would behoove me to start thinking about what does come next and what sort of are some positive alternatives that can create productive spaces that new types of consensus and action can come out of. But I haven't quite figured out what that is yet. Do you have any thoughts yourself?
Well, I do actually. But one would be, of course, to look for people who are, positive role model proprietors, places where it's actually fun to hang out, including cooperative restaurants and things like that, which I think would be one possibility. The other, and this is just off the wall, and we don't have that much time, but there was a fascinating fight between two hedge funders over Herbalife, the diet place, which creates spaces where people go and consume and buy the Herbalife products. And those have become the third spaces, if you will, in a lot of minority and low-income communities. So there may be an opportunity for a nonprofit-making version of that. But it's certainly a fascinating topic. And while we're on the topic, you've also, if I'm not mistaken, you've also written about millennials and
Yes.
And the pursuit of millennial voters. In the minute or so we have left, what is it people don't understand about the politics of millennial voters?
I think that what most people haven't come to understand yet is that there is a burgeoning movement in the political attitudes of millennials that is still pretty inchoate. It's still not exactly clear what the political makeup of my generation is going to be in the long term. But there's a move towards libertarian views that don't fall neatly into traditional conservative or liberal political views.
I'll have to cut you off there because we do want to get your thoughts on that, so we'll have you back. But maybe they need a third space to finally fine-tune their politics. Ben, thanks so much for being with us.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me again.
You bet. I'm RJ Eskow. Please come back next week for more of the same and even better next time. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.